Now, protesters gathered at the Nigerian Bar Association headquarters in Abuja on Monday, demanding the return of the Benue State Local Government Election Petition Tribunal to the state. This followed a court order from the Federal High Court in Makurdi on March 7th, which barred the tribunal from holding sessions outside Benue State. The tribunal adjourned indefinitely after the protests, with the panel confirming the suspension of sittings in Abuja in response to the court ruling. The protests were fueled by concerns over the tribunal's controversial relocation, and demonstrators called for no legal representation if it continued in Abuja. The relocation occurred after Benue Governor, that's Hyacinth Alia, cited security risks in Makurdi, Boko, and Otupo, where the tribunals are handling disputes from October 2024 local government elections. Alia had also banned protests and unauthorized gatherings around tribunal venues to ensure safety. But for more discussion on the protest at the Nigerian Bar Association headquarters in Abuja over the relocation of the Benue State Local Government Election Petitions Tribunal to the NBA building, and the need for a quick resolution to the crisis between the state government and the Chief Judge of Benue State in the interest of the quick dispensation of justice, we're now joined by a lawyer, Madaki Michael. Good afternoon. Many thanks for joining us here on Newsday.
Thank you very much for having me.
Of course. Now, what specific legal provisions or precedents justify or challenge the relocation of the Benue State Local Government Election Petitions Tribunal to the NBA building? Can you hear me?
Okay. Thank you very much for having me. If I get you clear, you are asking what the provisions are upon which the Chief Judge of Benue State relied on to issue an order to move the tribunal from Benue State to Abuja. Under the Benue State Electoral Law 2007 as amended, the tribunal is supposed to hold and sit within the state. And once it is sitting at a particular venue, it cannot move to any other venue except consent of all the parties is sought and had. This is provided for under Section 83, Sub 2 of the Benue State Electoral Act 2007 as amended. Now, this very section came into life when, in December, one of the council representing the petitioners asked that the tribunal should be relocated, the tribunal sitting in Adipo to be relocated to Makurdi. The Chief Judge then relied on that very provision and refused to move the tribunal to Makurdi because the consent of the other parties was not sought and had. It now becomes a little bit difficult to understand under what premise upon which the Chief Judge gave the order to move the tribunal from Makurdi in Benue State all the way to Abuja, the Federal Capital Territory. The order where he made that, issue that directive cites the issue of insecurity. But if you look at the issue of insecurity, it does not come to affect the other activities of all the other courts going on. The Benue State High Court is still sitting. The Court of Appeal, the Court of Appeal is still sitting, as well as the Federal High Court. All business of government and every other thing is going on very well within the state. So it becomes difficult legally to look at how the Chief Judge was able to give that order. And perhaps this is what spurred the issue of protest from other people to come in and also protest this whole event.
All right, thank you so much for laying that foundation. And in doing so, I hope you can also bring some clarity. Because if the justification for moving these cases, this tribunal from Benue State to Abuja is an issue of security, they're saying that there is insecurity surrounding the tribunal venues in Makurdi, Boko, and Otupo. I'm just curious, what is the normal practice? What does convention say should happen if there's insecurity around the areas where tribunals are supposed to hold? What does the law say?
Okay, so the tribunal is of such a sensitive nature that everything regarding its conduct is governed by law. When you speak to issues of insecurity, we all know the security of the state under the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria is regulated by the governor of the state. When this matter started and it was noted that some people had tried to come in and disturb the sitting of the tribunal, the governor of Benue State, Reverend Father Hai Santalia, had issued a statement and directed that more security should be provided to the premises of the court. The idea is, so far as it is selected to see that it is only this tribunal that is targeted by people that want to disturb it, the police should bring in more equipment and more power to make sure that there is peace in that place. But none of those issues, none of those other, all the issues under consideration give rise or are provided for under law that they should be moved out of the state. Now, we have seen situations where tribunals that sit in cases organized by INEC, the federal INEC, that tribunals are moved from the states to the FCT in Abuja. But usually, that is done upon consent of all the parties. But not just that, it is done because INEC conducts elections that are federal-based. In Benue State, these elections are local government elections, and under the Constitution of Nigeria, the local government is to be regulated by the State House of Assembly and the state government. So there is nowhere, there is no single legal basis that permits the relocation of the tribunal sitting for local government elections out of the state to another state or even the federal capital for that matter. If the chief judge was saying that insecurity was the issue, like I've pointed out elsewhere, that there are security formations within the state. The Air Force has a tactical air command base in the state. The Army has 2 bases. The Nigerian Police Command is just less than 2 kilometers away from where the tribunal sits. All of these things could have been resorted to. But the idea of moving the tribunal from Benue State all the way to FCT now brings up issues that throws the issue of observation and suspicion that perhaps there are ulterior motives regarding this move, especially that it is not based on any law at all.
Now, I'm just wondering, what precedents do you think this situation sets for executive interference in judicial matters across other states in the country?
Okay, for executive interference, I'm not sure I see the point of that here. What I see is that as of yesterday, the tribunal in Abuja, sitting in Abuja, gave a statement that they had received an order from the Federal High Court directing that no sitting should be made out of Benue State. That is still coming from the judiciary. So I don't see the issue of the executive reaching into the judiciary to interfere or what kind of a precedent that sets in the future. If for anything at all, it is the actions of the CJ by taking steps of relocating the tribunal out of the state based on issues of security, which is the exclusive preserve of the governor of the state, that who might be seen to look at it as having been the CJ overreaching his steps, taking steps that relate to security as if he also has executive powers of controlling the security architecture of the state.
So this issue seems to have been politicized. How do you see it playing out? Because it's clear that when we are looking at the Chief Justice in this instance, there is a face-off. What's your take on that?
My take on what exactly? Madam, please, can you come again, please?
to expatiate on the fact that, you said that it seems that the chief judge himself is now treading into the territory of the governor in exercising a form of executive power and saying that, oh, there is insecurity, so we need to move the tribunals outside of the state, which, of course, you've already said the security is the sole and exclusive purview of the governor. So I'm saying, what is your take? How do you think this will play out with regards to it being a face-off between the judiciary and the executive within Benue State? Has the judiciary been politicized?
So, let me state that this is not the first time that the local government election tribunals is sitting in Benue State. But this is the first time that it has become such a topical matter. And the reason is that the chief judge from the onset, my Lord Justice Piambese, has taken steps that have thrown some sort of perception for the other parties to look at it and grow suspicious of the steps he's taking. For example, you have a situation where currently all the cases that are before the tribunal, they are between the APC faction in the state against another APC faction within the state. There are a total of 299 petitions that are filed by another faction of the APC against the other faction of the APC. One faction seems to be supported and directed by some big politicians that are resident in Abuja, while the other people are being urged on and supported by the governor. So it is in this situation that the chief judge is taking steps that give out the impression that is creating soft landing for the other party, the other variant of the APC within the state that have filed 299 petitions. And it didn't start just now. It started from the moment that he gave them waiver to avoid paying fees and costs for security as provided mandatorily under Section 76 of the Benue State Benue State Electoral Law 2007. By waiving those fees out that amounted to almost 100 million naira, 299 petitions suddenly found their way. Unprecedented, that is the highest number of petitions that have ever been filed before any history of the Benue State local government election. So it's actually a matter of perception. If the CJ would take steps that will create no doubts in anybody's minds that he is not involved or he does not have any interest in what is going on, I'm sure everything will go on smoothly. But the moment he takes steps that create an impression that is in support of a particular faction of the politics, of the political party in the state, that is where all of those things generate tension that we are seeing play out now.
All right, now how would you characterize the NBA's responsibility in this situation? Would you deem them a neutral host, a mediator, or as an advocate for judicial independence?
Okay, so with the greatest respect to the NBA and its president, Leonard Senior Advocate Mazi Afam Osigwe, I don't think, in my own opinion, that the NBA should have stepped in at this moment to add its name to this controversy that is going on within the state. I say this because the NBA is a pressure group. It's an association made up of lawyers from all different backgrounds, different political parties, religion, and ethnicities. Where you have a situation where there is a fight or a tussle between two factions of a political party, I don't think it is proper that the NBA should step in at this moment to insert itself into the ongoings in a way that seems to say that they support one other faction. When tribunals are moved from other states under INEC's guidance, from other states and brought into the FCT, they are usually housed in government offices. There is the magistrate court in Wuse Zone 3, or some halls of the Court of Appeal, or various government institutions that are brought in to house this tribunal so as to create a situation of impartiality and that it is supported by government. the idea that the NBA came in at this moment, in my own opinion, was not proper, and it was most unfortunate because you now have a situation where the NBA might be subject to comments and commentaries that do not go to the root and functions and aims and objectives of the Noble Association.
Right. Now, there's another issue, which is the issue of protests and the ban on protests around the court premises currently in Benue State. And, of course, I asked this question because what has brought us here today are the protests taking place in Abuja relating to the same issue. Do you think the ban on protests was the correct move for the governor to make last week?
Okay, so the issue of securing the premises of the tribunal is the responsibility of the governor. And if he sees that to remove protesters away or cordon them off to a certain limit from the tribunal will provide security for the members of the tribunal, then I think it is prerogative to take that position.
Oh, why not
but
just beef up security? Why ban protests?
Yesterday, why security?
I said, why not just beef up security? Why would you ban people's rights, constitutional rights to protest?
You can beef up security, and I'm sure that is also part of what is going to be done. But the entire idea of beefing up security also relates to cordoning off the court in such a way that protesters are limited to a particular section to come, instead of coming all the way to choke the tribunal as a seat. Because if you allow the protesters come too close to the tribunal, even the protest alone is going to disrupt activities going on in the tribunal. So I think it's all part of the security architecture to provide some level of cordoning, because you can't actually stop protest, because that is guaranteed under Section 39 of the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. But that also has exceptions. For example, where you are providing security to such a hallowed institution like the tribunal and the courts, it is proper to cordon them off a little bit so that the activities of the tribunal can go on. For yesterday, I saw the protest that happened yesterday close to the NBA house in Abuja, where the protesters held various placards that spoke against the actions of the chief judge. I think, again, that relates to Section 39 of the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria that allows them to protest and express themselves. But even that too, we saw where the police and the security personnel were able to cordon them off and limit them to the extent to which they could come, so that assuming that activities took place at the tribunal, they will not be allowed to come in and interrupt the business of the day.
Well, I'd like you to, give us a sense from your perspective. What structural failures in the country's judicial system do you think have allowed this situation to deteriorate to this point?
Okay, so this kind of things happen when we leave compliance with the law and rely too much on the flexibility of interpreting the law and discretion. All of what you are seeing here, in my mind and in my opinion, from reading the situation that is going on, all of these things we're seeing here are brought to fore by the actions of the Chief Judge of Benue State. I think he has stepped in too much. I think he has intruded, so to speak. He has not allowed the tribunal to function strictly within the law as it was created and framed to function on. But
you can go ahead. Okay, I thought there was another point that you wanted to make. Just very quickly, before we move on from the issue
yes, I thought you were asking a question.
Yes. I don't want to move away from the issue of cordoning and controlling protesters just yet, because, we're looking at some precedents that are being set here consistently. If you remember the End Bad Governance protests that took place in August of last year, and one of the things that people called a strategy to ensure that the protests would not gather more momentum was to cordon it off to certain places where people were allowed to protest. And now we're seeing this being replicated at a state level, where a governor is saying that, well, I'm going to give you instruction as to where you're allowed to protest. And I just want to find out from you whether you think this is a healthy precedent in a democracy where people are encouraged to express themselves through peaceful protest. Because as far as I've seen, the protests seemed peaceful, or were they not? Can you just elaborate on that? Especially the fact that we are now seeing a precedent that has been set, that now the state determines the rules of how people protest, even though they are doing so lawfully.
Okay, so you have a point. You see, we have various rights that are provided for under the Constitution, and chief among them is that freedom of movement, freedom of expression. This is the two freedoms guaranteed by the Constitution under which protests happen. But the right to freedom has limitations. The right to expression also has limitations. Therefore, for example, I have my right to swing my arms, but my right to swing my arms ends at the very beginning of somebody else's nose. I cannot swing my arms to somebody's nose and claim my right. There is a boundary for that. So I note the idea of what you are speaking about in terms of creating dangerous precedent, and I agree totally. But where you have a situation where you need to protect, the state has a responsibility of protecting institutions or activities of government, then it is only proper that, like in this situation of the tribunal, that security forces will not stop the protest like they've done, but to try to guide them in a way that they do not interrupt the activities of the day. This is totally separate from restricting people from protesting on general things like it happened in a situation that you are citing where people are talking about end bad governance. The only danger to that is if this, and it has shown over time that if these protests are not sort of guarded and directed by security personnel, they have a tendency to go over. In that very line of protest that we saw, there are various videos in other states where people went berserk and started destroying properties, public infrastructure, and all of that. I think it is only in those areas that security has a responsibility to try to offer some sort of coordinated protest that don't descend into chaos. But as regards expressing views, it is guaranteed by the Constitution that people should be allowed to protest. But when it comes to issues that relate to state events, like this particular issue of the tribunal that we're talking of, it is, I think, only proper that protests will be limited to certain areas so that it does not interrupt the business of the day.
All right, Mr. Madaki Michael, thank you so much for sharing your insight with us. We appreciate your time here on Newsday. Thank you.